Hello everyone and welcome to another Guild Wars 2 video. Today I'm going to talk about the living story that took place in Southsun Cove, specifically the Secret of Southsun Cove and the Last Stand at Southsun. I'm doing both of these two parts of the living story together in a video, since I did not really consider Secret of Southsun Cove big enough to deserve its own video. And honestly, with the two of them put together, it works out fine. So let's go over some stuff really quick that's carried over from Flame and Frost, which is a living story before this. When the Molten Alliance attacked the Norn and Char, they drove many refugees out. The Consortium took them in, but required them to sign a contract when they were going to be transferred over to Southsun Cove. These contracts allowed the Consortium to use the refugees as pretty much a labor force for whatever they wish, no matter how dangerous, no matter whatever. So the refugees are not happy about this at all once they realize they're basically being used as like slave labor. And so they start to riot, they start to revolt, and cause all sorts of problems. At the same time, the animals in Southsun Cove have been acting much stranger and have been attacking the settlements much more often and much harder than before. Researcher Levy is still on Southsun Cove and has been looking into why these animals are acting so differently. She has noticed different plant life that has not usually been there before and asks you, the player, to take a device to go and scan this plant life and bring back to her all of the samples. I think there was 10 samples on the island. Maybe there's a little more. These samples can be found in pretty much almost every settlement on the island and really in almost every single corner of the island. Once you find all of the samples and go back to Levy, she concludes that it is these plants that is causing the animals to act crazed and to attack the settlements as much as they are. But that still leaves the questions. Where did these plants come from? Has someone been putting them there? Why did ArenaNet put stuff in the achievements that tell you the answers to this in the first day of the living story? Well, the answer to two of those questions can be found once you complete a defend event in the newer Steam Pipe Landing settlement. Once this event is completed, Inspector Keel will walk into the settlement and will start talking to one of the settlers named Henrika. Henrika confesses that she helped a Sylvari who knew the island very well, spoke really well, and who looked pretty tough with the setting up of these attacks and raids. And it was just to try and get rid of the contracts that was binding the settlers there. This causes Keel to make the same conclusion that many players did when they looked at their achievements for this event, and to conclude that Canuck is the cause of all of this. Besides the random events in the zone, this pretty much sums up what happened during the Secret of Southsun part of the living story. There were also a few logs that are scattered around at different camps, but honestly they pretty much gave you the same information that you were already given elsewhere, in that the Consortium wanted to keep them there and the settlers wanted to leave. That's about all you got from those logs. So then the story progressed to the Last Stand of Southsun. This phase of the living story was basically divided into two parts. The first part being the two instances that opened up, and that was the only changes originally. And the second part being the changes to the open world events and new events out in Southsun Cove itself. And also a story instance to wrap up the whole living story itself. So first I'll talk about these two dungeons, as they were called, that are basically personal story missions. They are not the same as the dungeon we experienced in Flame and Frost. They are not that large, they are not really that hard either. Mainly, I'm going to focus on the one that is single player, and that is when you go in to capture Canuck. When you first go into the instance, you'll find Inspector Keel and one other person. They will tell you that Canuck has been placing mines all over his lair to keep people out, and that he's also apparently been taking a bunch of drugs, which have made him invulnerable to normal damage, because that's what drugs do. So with this mine detector, it's possible to determine what each type of mine is, and then convert that mine into your control. So basically what you have to do on the fight is you turn mines into your control and you run Canuck over them. Canuck does almost no damage himself, and he does a knockback, and that can knock you into mines and hurt you. Besides that, he is very easy. It's not even hardly a challenge. Once you defeat Canuck, Keel, because Keel did all the work, Keel will come in and capture him in a cage, and will question him, why did you do this, da-da-da-da-da. And Canuck will just say someone had to do it because the refugees had to get out of here and no one else was doing it, so I stepped up. And then he will give a big forewarning saying, you don't even know what's coming. I've already set something in motion that can't be stopped, blah, blah, blah. And then they transport him away. The second instance, which I'm going to very briefly mention, is it's in the same place, the exact same map, the exact same mechanic, except for it is a golem named Subdirector Null, which is a funny play on words, you know, Null and Null. I can't even say them differently. So with him, it's the same exact thing, except for he goes invulnerable, and you have to pull him onto mines to make him not invulnerable, and then you do damage. It's a group-based little dungeon, and it's just the boss. It's not hard, really, except for when they made him immune to conditions. The second part of this phase of A Living Story happened about a week after The Last Stand started. Most of the changes in this phase were more open-world changes. These changes involved new events starting throughout Southsun Cove. These events are largely focused around 4 settlements inside Southsun Cove. These settlements are Point Pride, Keel's Outpost, Steam Pipe Steading, and Camp Karka. These events usually involve keeping the wildlife from overrunning the camps and just defending the camp's inhabitants from different dangers. When all 4 camps are under your control, a new NPC vendor will spawn. This vendor sells weapon and armor types of all rarities with this new prefix Settlers. Settler weapons and armor give the same stat combination as Apothecary, but the stat distribution on the 2 of them are different. Also, when all 4 settlements are under your control and she hasn't been defeated for a while, a crazed Karka Queen will spawn outside of Steam Pipe Steading. Crazed Karka Queen is a new world boss that they've introduced through this live event. Players will have 10 minutes to defeat her, and she behaves in much the same manner as a champion Karka does out in the zone on its own. I'm not sure what exact mechanics the Queen have that are specific to just her, as there were so many people there that I was almost lagging out most of the time, and I couldn't really see what the Queen was doing, because culling. If you all are unable to defeat the Queen within the 10-minute time period, she will disappear and reappear at one of the remaining controlled camps. She'll have full health, and you have 10 more minutes to defeat her. Queen's loot behaves much like a normal world boss in that she drops a treasure chest and gives guaranteed rare, but the Queen will give 2 guaranteed rares instead of 1. There was also another instance area added in during this phase in the Living Story. This instance is basically there to wrap up the story that's been unrolling through A Secret of Southsun and Last Stand at Southsun. During the story, Inspector Keel basically rounds up a couple of the refugees to help escort Noel and the contracts to safety while also trying to get them themselves to safety. This actually has a pretty nice ending, and I kind of like it, so I'm going to go ahead and let that play out so you'll all know the story that's going on. So here's the ending of that whole instance.
What just happened?
Oops. Looks like Canuck was one step ahead of us after all. What a shame. I'll be filling out forms and giving explanations to my superiors for weeks. Luckily, my Lion Guard had orders to clear the ship if anything unexpected happened. And hey, without those records, the settlers have no more reason to riot. So, things aren't all bad.
I see. You're in serious trouble, Inspector. I advise you to make those explanations very, very good.
Thanks, but I'm not worried. Turns out I'm fairly adept at thinking on my feet. I had to improvise to get the results you wanted, but the way is clear for next month's festival.
Sounds good. I just hope it's good enough to justify the earful I'm going to get from the consortium. But Canuck's in custody, the settlers are happy, and Noel is furious. I call that a good day's work.
Thank you, sir. But there's still a lot to be done here.
That's not your problem. You haven't taken a day off since I've known you. Take 3. Go buy a swimsuit and sit on the beach. Meet somebody. Go dancing. Anything. Just be something other than a Lion Guard for a while. That's an order.
So yeah, Keel finds a way to make the refugees happy and also tick off the consortium, which everybody's happy because no one likes the consortium. This clears up everything for the Dragon Festival, which comes out on June 11th, which I'll also be making a video to cover in case you missed it. So from this living story, you're probably wondering what actually stays in the world. The whole event chain with the 4 camps and the Crazed Karka Queen will always be there. Or not always, but it will be there after this event. Crab Toss, which I haven't mentioned really in it at all so far, which is now playing in the background, I would assume it will stay for after this. It might be taken out, but I don't see why they would waste the time to do that. I mean, it's not like it's hurting anything. Crab Toss I'll go over really quick. You basically, you grab the crab, you get points. You take the crab from someone else, you get points. If you have the crab, the Karka try to kill you. That's pretty much Crab Toss. It should be playing in the background right now, just to show you while I'm talking about this stuff. So pretty much conclusions on how this living story went from my perspective. I have to say I liked Flame and Frost much more than the Southsun living stories. The Flame and Frost living story seemed much more fleshed out, at least during the raising and the retribution stages. But I am glad that I waited on making this video, because I was going to bash on the Southsun living stories, because I was not happy with them. It finally came to me that this living story is basically just here to revise Southsun Cove into something that doesn't suck. Because no one went to Southsun Cove before this. Now there's a reason to go there. So I have to say this living story succeeded in what it looks like it was set out to do, which was getting more players back into Southsun Cove. Now this won't be as crazy as it has been during this event, but it should continue at some rate after this. Time will tell on that. Finally, I'm going to go over a few things looking forward. I'm going to look at a few more. This is more of conspiracy theory, shall we say. If you remember from Flame and Frost at the very end, one of the prisoners mentioned that someone was a city person who talked to them and convinced them that that was a good idea to come together. And, you know, he blamed them for that, blah, blah, blah. There wasn't very much information given. You should also know that we are still missing our rival, or whatever you want to call it, that they've talked about when they were talking about the living story. So our rival's still hidden at this point, but it was probably the person mentioned by the molten prisoner when you talked to him. The living stories that took place on Southsun have not yet made apparent who our rival is. But it's time for me to have a little conspiracy theory, because I like conspiracy theorying here. Is it strange to anyone else that there are 2 random nobles from Divinity's Reach that are achievements to talk to and don't do anything with this event? 2 well-spoken nobles from Divinity's Reach, a very big city. So, for some reason, Farron and Casimir are here in Southsun Cove. Farron and Casimir seem to have no reason to be there besides, oh, it's a vacation spot and we wanted to come out here. But why would ArenaNet make achievements for talking to them? It's very possible that one or both of these people could have been involved in the whole putting together of the Molten Alliance. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope this helped any of you that missed this living story. If you missed any of the other living stories that happened, I should have videos on the channel talking about those as well. And so yeah, see you next time, guys.